It happened decades ago, back when my world had just caved in on itself. My marriage was over, 12 years down the drain, and all I had to show for it was a half-empty apartment in Asheville and a drinking habit. I needed out space, distance, silence. So I grabbed my old pack, loaded up a week's worth of supplies, and drove west into the Nantahala National Forest in western North Carolina. Didn't tell a soul. I just vanished into the trees, and at the time, that's exactly what I wanted. The first day was quiet. Fog hung in the valleys, like old smoke, and the dirt trail I found was barely more than a game path. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to make friends or follow trail markers. I just wanted to set up my little tent by the creek and forget the world existed. I chopped wood. I made fire. I cracked a flask and ate jerky like some washed-up mountain man. But around dusk, just as I was stirring a shitty camp stew over the flames, I heard the softest sound this week, pathetic, coming from the edge of the tree line. I thought it was a coyote pup or something. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the woods, ready to scare off whatever stray animal thought it had found an easy meal. But when the beam caught on the thing limping toward me, I froze. It was a dog, a black lab, skinny, ribs showing under a coat of burrs and dirt. His back leg was all jacked up, limping hard, but it was the eyes that stopped me, big, wet. Shit, I muttered and tossed him a piece of jerky. That was it. That was all it took. He came close, cautious but hungry, and curled up by the fire like he'd known me for years. I named him Jax. Why? No idea. Just popped into my head. He didn't seem to mind. Jax didn't bark, didn't whine unless he was dreaming. But he followed me everywhere, like a shadow stitched to my boot, slept curled at my feet every night. I gave him some of my food and wrapped his leg with an old bandana soaked in creek water. He let me. Never snapped, never flinched. Like he knew I wasn't out there to hurt anything. Maybe he could smell the heartache on me. Second day, we went exploring. There's a stretch out there with no real trail, just these half-swallowed logging roads that disappear into thick undergrowth and briars. I figured we'd do a loop, maybe find a waterfall or something worth remembering. But halfway through the hike, we passed this old trail, barely even visible, just a line of mossy stones and broken brush that led deeper into the trees. That's when Jack stopped, dead in his tracks. He didn't growl, didn't bark. He just went stiff-tailed down, ears back, eyes wide. The kind of freeze you only see when something primal kicks in.
And then this sound came out of him.
Low, sad, like he was mourning something I couldn't see. I looked down the trail and saw nothing, just twisted branches and shadows. But it felt wrong, too quiet, just a stillness. Come on, I muttered, tugging his leash. Ain't nothing down there. He wouldn't move, not until I turned us around and took the long way back. That night, I didn't sleep right. Jax kept twitching in his sleep, growling softly like he was dreaming of something ugly. And I kept thinking about that trail, about the way the air changed when we passed it. Something had happened down there. Something bad. Third day, same shit. He froze at the same spot. I didn't even try pushing him this time. We doubled back, and I marked the spot on my map, not really knowing why. By the fourth day, we were supposed to head out. I'd packed everything, tightened the straps on my bag, and had just poured myself a cold splash of creek water when I noticed Jax was gone. Just gone. No bark, like he vanished into the trees without a sound. I panicked, ran through the brush, screaming his name. Heart thudding, sweat pouring down my back despite the cool morning air. I found his prints not far from camp, clear as day, headed straight back toward that overgrown trail. Of course. I followed. Every step felt heavier. After maybe 40 minutes of hiking, I came to a clearing I hadn't noticed before. There was an old cabin, or what was left of one. Half-collapsed roof, moss all over the rotting wood. Looked like no one had been out there in years. And there was Jax digging. He was going at it like something possessed. Dirt flying behind him, claws ripping into the earth. And then I saw what he'd found. First, the cloth. Faded floral print, soaked dark around the edges. Then bone. Then a boot mud caked and old, sticking up out of the shallow pit. I gagged. I fell to my knees and dry heaved. Jax just sat beside the hole, tail still, eyes locked on the mess he'd unearthed. I called the Rangers from my emergency radio. Took them 4 hours to reach us. In that time, I paced, shaking, staring at that hole like it might swallow me too. The dog never left it. Turns out, the cabin belonged to some guy who'd been living out there under a fake name. Hadn't been seen in months. Locals barely remembered him. Said he kept to himself and had a girlfriend named Maria. She'd vanished sometime over the winter. They all figured she'd left him and gone back to town. Nobody thought to check the woods. The Rangers pulled her body out in pieces. Clothes shredded. Skull cracked. She'd been buried quick and shallow, like whoever did it wasn't planning on sticking around long. But here's the thing, they didn't find the man. Just her. Just Maria. The guy who killed her and vanished. And after that, I don't think anyone ever figured out who either of them really were. The man was never seen again, disappearing without a trace. He buried his girlfriend behind the cabin. I kept Jax for another 8 years. Best friend I ever had. Slept at my feet every night. Never left my side. And he never, not once, walked near that trail again. I never camped there again. It's been years now. My ex-wife remarried some insurance guy. Good for her. I still think about Maria, about that bastard who got away. But most of all, I think about Jax, how he carried that pain all by himself until someone finally gave a damn. Dogs know things. They see what we won't. And sometimes they dig up what we're too scared to find. I don't know if my dad thought I was old enough to hear this story, or if he just wanted to scare the hell out of me, but I remember the first time he told me what happened back in 1992. I was probably around 8 or 9 years old, sitting in the back of the old pickup truck on one of those long drives through the country. Dad had this way of talking about the past, like it was some different life, something that happened to another guy. But that night, when I asked him about the time he went camping with his friend Clay, I could tell he didn't want to say much. That night, the words came out slowly. I think he might have been scared again, just telling me. So, let me back up. Dad was 17 that year, just a kid like me. Except he had Clay with him, a buddy of his, who'd been his sidekick since they were little. And they were stupid, like all kids are when they think they're invincible. So, they decide to go camping out in the middle of nowhere, up near the edge of the Uwharrie National Forest in North Carolina. And I think that's what they were looking for. Not the kind of peaceful getaway where you roast marshmallows and tell ghost stories, though. No, they were looking for something rough, a little adventure. They packed light. Just enough food for a couple of days and their camping gear, no real map. From what Dad said, it was the second day when things started to go bad. They were hiking along this trail they thought was safe, and that's when they ran into them. 4 guys, straight out of some nightmare. These men, if you could even call them that, looked like they were born and bred in the dirt. Ripped flannel shirts, faces covered in dirt and scruff like they hadn't seen a razor or soap in a decade. One had a bow strapped over his shoulder, the kind of thing you'd see hanging in a hunter's shack. The other one had a machete, all rusted at the edge. You'd think a sane person would have just turned and walked away, right? But not my dad. Not back then. Clay was the same way. They were too stupid to realize how much danger they were in. They thought they could handle it. At first, The four men just watched them. Didn't say much, just gave them this look like they were sizing them up. Like they were a couple of animals in the woods, ready to be picked apart. Then one of the guys, this tall, thin, with an unblinking stare, opened his mouth. He asked, real slow, "You boys lost, or you just plain stupid?" Dad told me he tried to laugh it off. Said something about just being a couple of guys looking to camp and get some fresh air. They didn't even nod. They just stared. The whole situation felt wrong, real wrong, and my dad said he could feel his gut twisting. He didn't want to make it worse, so he and Clay just kept moving, trying to put distance between them and those four guys. That night, it all went to hell. Dad says the first sign they got that things weren't right came after dark. It was around midnight, and they were in their tent, trying to sleep when they heard it. Whispering, laughter, low and dark, like the sound of something crawling just beneath your skin. Clay woke up first, then Dad, and neither of them dared make a sound. They didn't know what to do. They were too scared to breathe. And that's when it happened. Clay, being the stupid, he was pulled back the zipper of the tent just a little to peek out. What he saw made his face go white, Dad said. Those same four guys creeping through the woods, crouching low behind the trees, barely making a sound. They were so close, so damn close. They were watching them waiting, just staring through the dark. Then, without warning, one of those men fired an arrow into the side of the tent. It missed them by inches, but it might as well have been a bullet. The sound was deafening. That fletching whizzed through the air so close, Dad says it almost felt like it sliced the air right next to his ear. They didn't have a damn clue what to do. All they knew was that they weren't supposed to be there. It wasn't like a normal hunting trip. These men weren't hunting for food. They were hunting them. Dad didn't think twice. They grabbed whatever they could, flashlights, their bags, whatever, and they bolted. No time to think. They ran, blind, through that dark forest. They didn't stop running until they stumbled into a small ditch covered in leaves and mud. They dropped to the ground and just stayed there, dead still, holding their breath. They didn't say a word to each other, didn't even look at each other. They just waited, praying that the men wouldn't find them. They stayed there, buried under the leaves, until the sun started to break through the trees. By then, the forest was quiet again. The men's were gone. When they finally got up, they just ran. They didn't stop running until they got back to the parking lot, where they'd left their car. But when they reached it, when they thought they were safe, that's when they saw the damage. The car was trashed. Tires slashed. Windows smashed. Dad said the whole thing looked like a mess of broken glass and metal. Whoever had done this wasn't just trying to scare them. They wanted to destroy everything they had. They reported everything told him about the four men, about the arrow, about the destruction of the car. But the sheriff just nodded, like he'd heard this story 100 times. Said there were rumors, whispers about wild folks living out in those woods. But nothing concrete. Nothing that pointed to these four men, specifically. It was like the sheriff had already written off the whole area as dangerous, no investigation further. My dad never went back to those woods again. He said he couldn't trust the woods anymore. He never told me the full story when I was younger. I think he wanted to keep me from being afraid of the world. My mother. She told me this story once, just once, when I was too young and stupid enough to think I could handle a solo camping trip myself. I still remember how her jaw clenched, the way her hands twisted the hem of her shirt like she was trying to strangle the memory back into the ground. This happened back in the early 90s, before cell phones were a lifeline and nobody had GPS unless they were in the military. My mom was in her late 20s, independent to a fault, the kind of woman who kept a hatchet under her car seat and trusted her gut more than any map. That summer, she'd packed up her old Jeep Cherokee. She set up camp on the edge of some state forest. She never told me exactly where. Probably because part of her never wanted me going there, maybe ever. It wasn't a public campsite, just a little clearing near a dirt trail that disappeared into the woods. She liked it that way, quiet, solitary. It was her second night out. Around 7 or so, she laced up her sneakers and went for a jog down the narrow back road that snaked past her camp. She said it was peaceful at first. She was maybe 2 miles from camp when she first noticed the brown car. A shitty old sedan. Tinted windows. No front plate. It crawled up behind her, so slow she thought it had broken down at first. But it didn't stop. Didn't pass. Just coasted behind her, matching her pace like some sick little game. That was the first red flag. The second was how the hair on her arms stood up, like every nerve in her body was yanking the emergency brake. She didn't wait to find out what the hell he wanted. She bolted into the ditch on the side of the road, landing hard in the mud and weeds, scraping her palms. She lay flat, listening, her heart punching through her ribs like it was trying to escape without her. The car slowed to a stop, engine rumbling just feet from where she was buried in brush. She held her breath. She said it felt like hours. No door open. No voice called out. The car just sat there, idling like it was waiting for her to make a move. Eventually it rolled off. Slowly. Like it wasn't in any rush. Like he was just marking time. Mom didn't run back. She sprinted. Full tilt. Legs burning. Barely stopped long enough to grab her pack and keys before diving into the safety of her Jeep. That's where she slept, if you can call it sleep. Doors locked, knife in her lap, lights off. But the nightmare wasn't done yet. Around 2 a.m. she woke up. No reason, just instinct pulling her up from whatever half-sleep she'd managed. That's when she heard it. An engine, low and steady. Just outside the tent. She peeked out from the back window. The brown car was there. Again. Parked maybe 20 feet away. No headlights. Just sitting. Watching. She didn't know what the hell to do. No one got out of the sedan. They just sat there. Then, mercifully, a flashlight beam cut through the trees. A camper from a site down the hill. One she hadn't even noticed before, was taking a late-night piss, or walking his dog, or maybe just couldn't sleep either. Whatever the reason, his light hit the brown car. Mom didn't stay another night. She didn't even pack up properly. She tore out of there before dawn, left half her gear behind. Drove 4 hours until she hit the first gas station with a working payphone. Called my grandpa and told him she was coming home. It wasn't until months later that the pieces clicked into place. She was watching the news at my grandparents' place when his face showed up. Carl Duncan Ray. That was the name they plastered across the screen. Arrested in Georgia. After a failed abduction, some college girl got lucky and managed to get away. Cops searched his place and found a treasure chest of horror. Photos. ID. Locks of hair. All blonde, all light-eyed, all women who looked exactly like my mother. She said she dropped her glass when she saw him. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stood there staring at that bastard's mugshot, realizing she'd stared him in the face that night in the woods. Carl Duncan Ray never got charged for every victim. Some of them were never found. But Mom, she was almost one of them. She never went camping alone after that. Not once. And she never let me either. I don't think I've ever seen my mom look that much scared.